advice do you give to people to find those circles if they don't, have them right in front of them?
Yeah, so, um, uh, well, first of all, they might be in front of you more than you think they are, right? And so I always kind of start there like, hey, think about the concept of intentionality. What is it that you're trying to learn? What's an area you're trying to grow? What's a type of person or area that you want to develop, right? And so then thinking about like kind of stepping through this process, like who do you already know that might be doing that?
Yeah.
Right? And probably just like you can go through your email contacts, you can go through your phone contacts, and probably there's someone who mostly fits the bill that is already in your circle of connections, and you just might not be cultivating that relationship with them.
That's a great point.
Maybe they had a connection with them years ago, maybe it was in college or a previous job or something, and maybe it's been years since you chatted with them. And so that's often a place that I suggest people go. And it's interesting because there's another kind of negative connotation to networking is people have this weird resistance to reaching out to people because they feel like, oh, if I'm reaching out, then I'm just like using them for something or whatever. And just a little reframe on that is thinking about like, if that same person that you're thinking about reaching out to, reconnecting with, even if it's been a while, if they reached out to you, would you be excited about that? And would you be so pleased that they thought of you to reach out and reconnect? If you feel that way, then it's quite likely that they would feel the same way about you reaching out to them.
I love that. I've never thought of that before, but that is powerful. So how do you suggest, if that's way out of someone's comfort zone, which frankly, I think it is for most of us based on what you're just saying. What are some of the...
I'm totally fine with that being outside of people's comfort zone.
It's okay to be outside your comfort zone.
Getting outside of our comfort zone is great.
Yeah. So how do you suggest people approach that? I mean, even just wording, somebody you haven't talked to for 20 years that you think, man, I feel like I could learn something from this person. I want to spend more time around this person so that their good habits can teach me, rub off on me. How do you even approach that? How do you kind of coach people through approaching some of those initial networking conversations?
Yeah, so it depends on what the previous relationship is or isn't yet, right? So if it's a previously established relationship, something as simple as like, hey, it's been a while, can we chat soon? Like, don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Right? If it's someone who you don't know, if you know someone who does know them, like getting an introduction is great, and they're generally much more willing to have an initial conversation by the phone or a web chat or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Like, just can we have a quick conversation? Or some people get together with a meal if they're local or something. But don't overcomplicate it. Just express interest, curiosity in who they are, what they do, why you're interested in having a conversation with them, and then go from there. And then if that initial conversation goes well, then great. You can then choose if you want to continue that relationship, continue to cultivate that. Then you can establish, hey, is there something else we want to do or work towards or work on? Would you be willing to be a mentor if that's something that you're trying to establish? Could we talk on a regular basis? If so, great. If they say no, like that's fine. Like let's find someone else. It's not a big deal. You can still learn from them and what they do because plenty of people want to protect their time as well, and that's totally fine.
Right.
So, but I love that old quote from Wayne Gretzky, who was like one of the greatest hockey players of all time. He says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if they say no, then they say no.
Yeah.
But if you don't ask, then the answer is no. Because you haven't
yeah, that's such a good point. And I love that idea. I also love the idea as you're talking, initially it was kind of a new idea for me to think, how many people that you're afraid to reach out to, would you be thrilled if they reached out to you? But then taking that a step further, if you reach out to somebody and ask their advice on something because you see them as an expert in that, there's nobody that doesn't like that, right? I mean, when people that I have not remembered from 15 or 20 years ago have reached out to me and asked me about any number. Could I get your opinion on this? Could I get your advice on this? That always feels good, right? And so very few people are going to be put off by that kind of a request. So that's a good thing to remember as well.
Yeah, and that depends, right? Like we're talking about different layers of people. Like some people are going to be like, okay, yeah, but I'm an extremely busy person.
Right.
You want to like pick my brain. That feels weird. You want to buy me a meal, but my time's worth thousands of dollars an hour,
right.
And you're going to buy me a $30 or $40 lunch even.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't equate, right? So recognize there are people, and they're going to be like, hey, I post all this stuff on social media, and I've written all these books. Like, you want to pick my brain? I've already
read those first.
So some people are going to act like that, right? And so you got to recognize, like, you know, what layer you're trying to connect with people at, and where they're at, where you're at, and what you're really offering. But and that's the other thing is like be just kind of the mentality is like don't just be a taker in relationships. Like no good relationships are built, you know, just one way. Like be a giver too. So find some way that you can give and
give value to that person.
Contribute to the relationship. Sure. Absolutely, not just say, hey, can I get something out of you? Because that doesn't feel good for anyone.
Yeah, I love that. And before we move on to the next question, I just want to mention to our audience too, if you have questions for Jeff as we go, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We can relay those to him and answer some of those questions as we go. So just moving on, just another question from your networking section. You actually used the quote, networking is a lot like nutrition and fitness, which ties both of these pieces together for us. We know what to do. The hard part is making it a top priority. And I think that's something that most of us struggle with when we're trying to make changes, right? We know what we want to do, and we know what the end outcome is, and we want that end outcome. But making the hard work of getting to that outcome a priority can be really difficult, especially kind of in the middle of the process, right? You're really motivated at the beginning. You might be seeing all of that progress and see the end in sight at the end, but that middle slog can be really tough to keep the priority where you want it to be. So how do you counsel people through keeping their eye on their priorities and really pushing through to the end goal?
Yeah, so there's a few things I go through here. First of all, I love the concept that was popularized by Simon Sinek, is like connecting with a why. He says start with why, book and TED Talk and a bunch of things on that concept. And I use a tool that comes from my world of engineering. It's kind of like a root cause analysis tool where you kind of start with, hey, what's the problem? And it's called the 5 whys exercise, where you ask, why did that happen? Why did that happen? Why did that happen? We're trying to get down from the surface level issue that we're trying to address down to the root cause.
That's
awesome.
I
use that same concept in trying to dig into what's really underneath someone's goals or intentions that they're stating that they want. Like, why do they really want that? Why is that really important? And then digging a level deeper, and then asking why again, and asking why again. And when you dig far enough, you're usually going to find the real goal behind the goal, right? Or the purpose behind what they say. Because often when we ask someone or we have this conversation, it's kind of that surface level thing, right? So if someone's like, I want to lose X number of pounds, or I want to get to this weight, or I want to be able to do X, Y, or Z with my health and fitness. Okay, why? Give an answer. Well, then ask why again. Why is that important? Dig deeper and deeper and deeper. If we can connect with that deeper why, it's usually going to help drive more intrinsic rather than just the extrinsic external motivation.
Sure.
And then we can connect to that in a more powerful way.
And then that intrinsic is what powers you through when the extrinsic fails.
Well, I'm going to say both is there. But the extrinsic is not just trying to rely on our willpower, and that goes back to the networking, the connections, relationships we have, but also cultivating our level of commitment and our environment. I just read a book from an author that I love named Benjamin Hardy called Willpower Doesn't Work. And it's kind of an environment design book that says our environment shapes a whole lot of what we do. And yeah, we do have limited willpower. So shaping who we're around, our network, and also what we put around us has a huge impact on just the easiness of what we've been do. But I'll give you one more example from a health and fitness perspective, connecting with the network. So I have a friend who went through a big fitness journey of his own a number of years ago, went through a program that maybe isn't terribly dissimilar to the Showmed program, really regimented in certain foods that he would eat, and he lost like 40 pounds and has been able to maintain that. And he and I reconnected, like we were friends in high school and college and stuff. We reconnected a few years ago, a little bit more deeply, and just started to be accountability partners. And one of the things that I do is create an accountability commitment contract with him virtually every week that says, hey, I will do these things in terms of my exercise, my eating, and some other things. And if I accomplish that, great. If I don't, then I owe him $10.
Oh.
$10 isn't a whole lot of money. But it's just annoying enough that when I think about after I put the kids to bed and searching around my kitchen for something else that I want to eat, and I've committed to him that I'm not going to eat food after dinner, you know, my late night snacking habits that I used to have, then I don't do it. And I've been doing this with him for 2 or 3 years, and I paid him twice, I think. I think he's paid me twice. So I think we're even, right? So
that's a great idea.
It's just annoying enough. And even when I go to events and stuff, where normally I'm like, hey, everyone's doing this thing. I'm at an event. And I'm like, no, I've made this commitment. I'm not going to do that. And it's not a huge deal. I just don't have dessert at the thing that I'm going to.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's really simple and easy. But because of this relationship that I have and a commitment that I have, that creates this inner layer of commitment. It's intrinsic and extrinsic at the same time.
Oh, okay, so that's awesome.
It's a really practical example.
So that's a great example. So how many pieces go into that specific commitment? Is it just eating after dinner? Is it a whole 10 different pieces? What does it look like?
Specifically for me currently, it's not eating after dinner and no dessert for certain days of the week, just period. And then a certain number of workouts across the week. And then I also do a certain number of additional sets of push-ups and ab workouts that I do. I usually try and do 5 sets a day. And so I count those up throughout the week and say I need to do this many sets throughout the week. And so those are a few simple things. So I think it's like 4 things.
Do you find that there's kind of a magic spot with that? Like you need to have at least 4 or 5 things, but you can't go more than 7 or 8 before it gets to be too hard to maintain, or do you not really feel like that matters? Does that make sense?
I think it matters to the person where they're at the moment. How's that?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It kind of depends. Like it's where I'm at right now and what I feel like I can commit to, and so it's a push.
Yeah.
But not overwhelming. And so it feels doable, and so I'm able to keep that, even though I don't always want to every single day.
I love it. Let's talk about self-care for a minute. You talk about self-care in your book. I know you talked and experimented a lot with different forms of mindfulness activities. Talk about why you feel like self-care is so, how you've seen self-care be such an important part of making changes and achieving your goals. And what kinds of self-care you've seen to be, I know it's individual, but what are some ideas? I know for me, when people say self-care, sometimes I just draw a blank and I have no idea even where to go with that. So maybe give some examples of what that looks like, and then its impact on goal setting and making changes that are difficult.
Yeah, so I guess I would say that we could put self-care in this category of like what recharges you, right?
Yeah.
Think about, often we focus on managing our time and things like that, and maybe even more importantly is managing our energy and our attention.
Yes.
And so self-care is a way to like think about the things that give you energy in your life.
Yeah.
and fill you up. Because if all you're doing is doing things all day, every day that drain you, it's going to be really hard to have the energy to do the other things that you're trying to add on if you have goals or intentions that you want to change or have different. And so for me, being active in not just like a workout, but also love playing sports. I've gotten into pickleball a lot the last few years. In fact, today it was a beautiful day in the winter, and I got invited to go play pickleball at a park, and I had time, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go do this. That's going to fill me up. And I felt great because I was able to move my body and get out in the sunshine.
Yeah.
Because I also sometimes get affected with less sunlight in the winter and stuff like that, seasonal effectiveness disorder. And so that was me intentionally saying, hey, that's self-care. And it filled me up.
Yeah.
And it was great. And sometimes self-care is being with people, again, going back to the networking concept of like being with people that fill you up and help you feel better and love you and support you in whatever that you're doing. And so, and for some people, it is going to be something else. But like, yeah, I guess the easiest definition for me, what self-care is like what
recharges you,
gives you more energy, what recharges you.
I like that. I really like what you just said about conserving your energy and your attention. Is that the word you used? Brain space?
Yeah,
basically?
Energy and attention management rather than just time management.
Just time management. I love that. So really attention management has a lot to do with mindfulness activities, right? Learning to clear your brain. It's not the only way, obviously. I think staying off of social media and the news and all of those things that clutter up our brains sometimes and don't allow space for some of these changes we want to make. But what are some of your thoughts on and experience with mindfulness activities? And how do you coach your clients through some of that?
Yeah. So there are a lot of different definitions of mindfulness generally, and sometimes it's thought about like clearing our head, clearing our minds. And I would change that a little bit differently, and I prefer another definition, which is more like reconnecting to ourselves and maybe in a spiritual sense, our spirits as well. In fact, there's one quote, I forget who it's from, but from one of my friends who I've learned a lot of mindfulness stuff from, is like, mindfulness is not a clear mind, but an awakened spirit. Right? And I love that. And it's kind of this awakening and this reconnection. And so a number of things that I've done, from the simple to, hey, something really frustrating is happening, whether that's my kids blowing up again at another one of my kids, or something frustrating at work or something, and just like a few deep breaths go a long way to just calm me down. You want a specific type of breath. If people are familiar with Andrew Huberman of the Huberman Lab podcast, he's a neuroscientist and biologist who does a lot of work. He has a tool called the physiological sigh. Really quick, he suggests like 3 of them can get you to come down and regulate like cortisol, stress hormones pretty quickly. And it's kind of a 2-part in-breath where we do, and like that really final one that kind of forces that the full lungs, and then out, like 3 of those. He calls it the physiological sigh, and research has shown that can regulate our stress hormones pretty quickly. So there's some like really quick things. Sometimes I'll get into deeper meditation. Sometimes they're completely open-ended, where I'm just trying to reconnect with myself or God, or different pieces of me, without getting into specifics. But sometimes I can notice through kind of a somatic recognition of different parts of my body and what I'm feeling where, and that can be
Sorry.
I've also really, no, you're okay. It's that time of year for the itchy cough. I've had it too recently.
Yes. Keep talking. You're doing great.
And I've also really enjoyed from a mentor of mine learning about a style of meditation called holotropic breathwork that is a pretty in-depth meditation style that's been impactful for me. So a number of different things in terms of mindfulness meditation stuff. I do occasionally use an app called the Calm app.
That's
does
such a
guided
good one.
meditation
Yeah.
for me. And we'll do them with our kids sometimes. They have some kids meditations. We could do them more often than we do, and the kids sometimes follow along and enjoy them. And I just find those different ways to regulate.
Aura is another really good one. Calm and Aura are my two favorites. Those are great ones. Thank you. That's awesome. Really quick, as we're wrapping up, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the idea of manifesting. I know you've done a little experimenting and researching on this, and we've talked a little bit about that on the webinar, really how it's more about teaching our brain these positive neural pathways that then can express themselves in our everyday life and the opportunities we're seeing and taking advantage of. Can you speak to that? And I'm going to go get a drink while you talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm no expert in the world of manifesting, but I do work a lot on mindsets, and I find some of the models out there for mindsets are that mindsets is kind of the way, the lens through which we see the world, and that mindsets drive our behavior and behavior drives our results, right? And so if we can change our mindsets, the way that we see the world and ourselves and other people, that's going to change how we show up and react. And really, mindsets are kind of, we were talking about neural pathways, like mindsets are just that, like they are our neural connections. And so sometimes the mindsets that we might want to have right now are little, like tiny little side roads of pathways inside of our minds, where we need to go through that process of intentionally cultivating those mindsets, that way of seeing, that way of being. And eventually that can become a 2-lane road and a highway or a super freeway, and it becomes an easier way of being. And so just reconnecting with a stronger, more powerful way of being and seeing the world has a huge impact on that. Changing how we see other people. Are we seeing the best in them? Are we seeing the best in ourselves? And one of the ways that I try and do that is changing the language that I use around talking about myself, talking about other people, talking about challenges and opportunities that are in front, because language has power to create.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that. I love that.
Don't look at manifesting as just this like magical woo-woo, I'm just going to write something down, I'm going to think about it, meditate it, and visualize it in my mind, and poof, it's going to happen.
Right.
Just in this time that I say it's going to. But I do think that emotionally connecting to things that we truly want has a huge way of then changing our perspective and seeing ways of making that be true.
I love that.
Right? And finding pathways for us to create the life that we want to create. And so, yeah, I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. There's a lot to it, but I think just simplifying, manifesting different than the way that we typically set goals. I've got another mentor who says, like, hey, let's reframe them to dreams instead, like dreams that we want to create in our lives.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the nice thing is that dreams have a really positive connotation, and goals sometimes have a negative connotation. When you look at the data around goals and New Year's resolutions, we just are about to finish January. Only 9% of people actually keep their New Year's resolutions. At least that was data from 2024.
Yeah.
Not great, right? And so there becomes a lot of shame around that. So if we change that to dreams, we have a positive connotation. And then the getting in that state, and this is maybe some of that like manifesting characteristic. A lot of times we set goals from a place of lack and scarcity. If we shift that and get into a place of gratitude and abundance and create dreams and intentions that we want from that space, then it's a much more powerful place to come from, and we're much more likely to then take the actions and have a stronger mindset and orientation to the world to create that as a reality.
That's
but
beautiful.
We are fully committed to doing what needs to happen while also emotionally disconnected from the outcome. Like if it doesn't happen, it's not going to be a knock on us, but we're also committed to creating the systems to create what we want.
Wow.
Right? So
that's
it's this
powerful.
weird dichotomy that actually creates a cool way of being.
I love that. Do you have any other counsel or advice that you give your clients when they're trying to make changes to become better versions of themselves in their careers or in general? What are the main places that you tell them to focus on and start? Let's wrap up with that. Anything that we haven't already discussed?
Yeah, journaling is one of the places that I think one of the easiest, and it's free, practices to increase our awareness, improve our mindsets, and continue to bring us back to changes that we want to make. And so starting as simple as possible, if you want to create that as a habit, with like a gratitude journal, and just say 3 things every day, and just finding a habit. You can add on from there. There's a whole lot more. So that's number one. Second is kind of reinvigorating like their identity. So I work with a lot of people in career transitions, and one of the challenges there that people have is they take on their identity as whatever their career is. Like I am this type of engineer or whatever.
So it's hard to change.
That's only one piece of who they are in a holistic sense, and it's not even the most important.
Right.
And so looking at those other pieces of your life and saying what's actually most important. And so like identifying those identities that you take on and who you are and how you show up that are actually the most important to you. And it's usually not the answer to the question, what do you do?
Yeah, interesting. I love that.
And then third, we'll just go back to kind of where we started, is find people who fill up your energy and help you be a better person, help you want to be your best, and spend more time with them as much as you can.
Yeah, I love that. Gosh, thank you so much. What a wealth of knowledge you are, and so well read, and so many great ideas and quotes and great things to think about. And for everybody watching tonight, get excited because we might end up doing a $10 accountability challenge. That was a great idea. Thanks, Jeff, for joining us tonight. We're so grateful for all of the things that you've shared with us, and are excited to incorporate some of these principles and ideas into our goal setting and moving forward. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again next week. Good night.